Hello philosophers, I'm Chico. Welcome to the Philosopher's Classroom, where we discuss something from the Philosopher Show in a little more academic detail. I promised you on the What Are Universals video that I would give you a review of the 3 phenomena that lead up to that question. I have here what philosophers call a toy example. An example we're going to play with to sort of tease apart some of these ideas. And I got this from J.P. Moreland's book, Universals. I have a link in the description. You can go get it yourself if you like it, if this topic is interesting to you. Phenomenon number 1 was predication. Now I'm going to put a red dot on the screen. Now let's name this dot Ron. So the name Ron points to that specific thing. And I say, Ron is red. Now again, Ron points to a specific thing in space and time, but red doesn't seem to point to a specific thing in space and time. It's true of that specific thing, but it's not like red is always right there. It's that thing that I'm talking about right there. And to make this super clear, here's what we're going to do. We're going to also name Ron's color right there, that specific color in space and time, that specific instance of red. We're going to name it Ron Red. And now I'll say Ron Red is red. Now Ron Red points to that specific color right there. When I say Ron Red does not mean the same thing as red. Red doesn't have to be that specific red right there. It could be any red. Now Ron Red points to that thing. What does red point to? Not sure. Whatever it is, we're left with this question. How can we say Ron is red when red isn't Ron? Red and Ron aren't the same things. So predication, how can we say universals are true of the things that have them? Phenomenon number 2 was attribute agreement. I'll throw a new red dot on the screen and we'll name this red dot as well. We'll name it Ginny. And now we could say Ron is red, Ginny is red. But wait a second, red exists in 2 different places? And again, to make this super clear, I'll name Ginny's specific color right there, that instance of red, Ginny red. I could say Ron red is red, Ginny red is red, but Ron red isn't Ginny red. Ron red is pointing to a specific red right there, Ginny red to another specific red, but red isn't pointing to a specific red. How can red exist in 2 places at once? So attribute agreement, universals seem predicable of multiple things. They can be true of many things in different places at the same time. And third is abstract reference. Apart from any dots on the screen, I can say red is a color. Now, when I said Ron was red, you might have thought, oh, I totally know what makes that true. That thing right there that I can point to. But now think about red as a color. I'm not pointing to any specific thing. What makes that statement true? In fact, remember, imagine all red things were destroyed. I say red is a color, that still seems true even though there aren't any individual red things. So phenomenon number 3, abstract reference, it seems like we can make true statements about universals apart from the particular things that have them. If you're still confused, hit me up in the comments and I'll do my best to explain it to you in a different way. Possibly hit me in one of our live streaming events that we're going to do, and that way we can have a little bit of dialogue. Metaphysics talks about what is real. Now sometimes they show things that things that seemed real aren't real. But can it work the other way around? Can they show there are real things? Can metaphysics show there are real things that we never even thought existed? Let's consider. Hello philosophers, I'm Chico. Welcome to the Philosopher Show, where we consider the greatest questions of human history. I think one of the most awesome aspects of science is the discovery of new things. They discover new species. For example, my kids are hooked on octonauts. I don't know if you've had to deal with this. I have an 11-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 1-year-old. The 2 younger ones love octonauts. And I have to admit, man, I've learned about some weird stuff that seemed pretty interesting, like siphonophores. If you don't know what a siphonophore is, Google that. So watch the Octonaut episode and they'll totally explain it to you. But it had to be sick to be the first person to discover something that bizarre. Or we look out into space and find weird stuff like quasars. I mean, I don't even really know what that is, but it sounds pretty cool. Now, philosophy doesn't go about exploring things empirically like science does. It does take the empirical discoveries of science, but empirical exploration isn't really a methodology that philosophers can use. Now, you might think, well, you should add it because it's important. But the stuff we're talking about in metaphysics especially are things that you can't really observe in that way. So, for example, one of our questions is, what is existence? What does it mean to be real? Now, we can't go out and observe non-real things and compare them to real things because non-real things, by definition, don't exist. So they're not empirically observable. So one of the quintessential questions in metaphysics is clearly not observable. And that's okay. It's just a different kind of knowledge with a different kind of method of exploration. Now, in metaphysics, we talk about the deepest level of reality. Can metaphysics discover new, real things? Some philosophers believe that it can. These philosophers believe they're using abductive logic to posit an entity. Now, abductive logic is reasoning to the best possible explanation. So, for example, I'm going to give you a nasty example. I apologize ahead of time. I don't know why this is what was in my head when I thought about this. I remember one day I went to my aunt's house, Tia Jenny, right? And she had a little dog, Coco. And I love to play with dogs. And I accidentally scared Coco, and Coco went number 2s on the carpet. I felt really bad. I went to go get a paper towel to pick it up and throw it away. When I came back, the number 2s had disappeared. And all that was left was Coco standing there looking at the scene of the crime, licking her chops. And that was the day I discovered that dogs eat their own number 2s sometimes. Or as my tia used to say, eat their own puppies. I didn't know dogs ate their own puppies. Now, do I know for a fact that Coco ate his own poop? Do I know for a fact that Coco ate her own poopies? No, not absolutely certain. There are other theories. Maybe aliens beamed themselves into my aunt's house, grabbed up the poopies and beamed themselves out, and the dog was just hungry that time and just happened to be looking at that one spot. Possible? Sure. So what I'm left with abductive logic is a good reason to believe one thing. And of course, I might not be left with that. Maybe there is no one best theory that seems to stand out shining amongst the rest of them. So metaphysicians think that they start off with abductive logic, and then they go and posit an entity. Let me show you how this happens in science. Now, the amount of matter in a system of bodies in space affects the amount of gravity that holds it together. Bodies are in orbit around another body or around each other only if there is the right amount of gravity to keep them in that orbit, and that gravity is there only if there's the right amount of matter. So, for example, this is why the Earth doesn't fly off into space or crash into the sun. It has the right amount of matter to have the right amount of gravity to go around the sun. So depending on the motion and the speed with which... And the faster it turns, the more gravity you're going to have to keep it together. Just like if you're an old person like me and you used to have the merry-go-round. I don't know if you ever did this when you were a kid. We used to hold on to the center thing, and like you'd lay down and one kid would run as fast as he could and spin that thing as fast, and you'd be holding on, and the faster you went, man, you were holding on for dear life, just hoping you didn't just fly off. Oh, we were stupid kids. So more speed around, more gravity needed, more strength, more gravity needed to keep you together. Now, in the early 20th century, all matter that had been observed reflected light. So by the amount of light that was reflected from a body in space, you can kind of guesstimate the amount of matter that thing must have. Along comes Fritz Zwicky, a scientist who in 1933 was observing the Gamma galaxy cluster. He sees how much light is given off of that, estimates the amount of matter that must be there, then measures the speed with which it's rotating, and says something's wrong here. There's not enough matter based on my calculations from the light given to hold this galaxy cluster together. There's got to be more matter somewhere. So what should we conclude? One thing we could conclude is that gravity over there is a lot stronger than gravity over here. That, for some reason, that seems like a little too weird. Another thing we could conclude is another theory we could have is possibly there's some matter that doesn't reflect light. And that would account for why there is more matter than the light would indicate in that galaxy cluster. So observe the method. So check the method. Zwicky observes a phenomenon, and he posits an entity, dark matter. Notice he didn't observe dark matter. He posited an entity. He said, what if this thing existed? And then he says, how well would it explain what I just saw? And how many weird things would I have to believe in based on this new existing thing? The idea that gravity is different in different places of the universe, that's a lot. The idea that there's some matter that doesn't reflect light, that's not so weird. And so dark matter is posited. Now that's something that can eventually be observed. And we said in metaphysics we can't observe things. So some philosophers have said, maybe this isn't the right way to go about doing metaphysics. But this isn't the only example. But think about this. There are some scientific theories that lead to conclusions that are not observable. So, for example, Big Bang Theory. The idea here is we see certain effects, the cosmic gravity, the cosmic background radiation, Doppler effect of light. And we say, what must the cause have been like? Now, we could posit some really bizarre stuff. And then we posit an entity, a Big Bang. And we see how nicely that entity explains what we're seeing right now. And we weigh that against kind of some of the weird stuff we're going to have to believe in. Like maybe all four forces, like maybe all four universal forces were actually one force at the beginning. Something like that. Well, the metaphysician can say, that's exactly what I'm doing. I can't go... But notice, the scientist can't go and actually observe a Big Bang. It's not like you could make a Big Bang in your laboratory. It's not like you make a Big Bang in your laboratory. If we could make a Big Bang, it would destroy our entire universe and you couldn't observe it. So here's something that we can't observe, and we're positing as a real thing because it seems to explain what we can observe. And it seems to explain it best. That is what metaphysicians think that they're doing. That is what some metaphysicians think that they're doing. For example, the realists. For example, realists about universals. And if you don't know what I'm talking about yet, go to the universals playlist and you can and you'll see what I'm talking about. But realists see abstract reference, attribute agreement, predication. They say, what would best explain this stuff? Let's posit an entity we'll call universals, a real thing out there. How well does it explain everything? How much weird stuff do we have to believe in? And realists think the explanatory power way outweighs the weird stuff that you have to believe in. So this is a good reason to believe that universals are real. And that, my friends, is what some metaphysicians think they're doing. Now, not all metaphysicians agree to that. Some metaphysicians, in fact, think that this is not a good way to go. But that will have to be for another time. Again, as I always say, best philosophy happens in dialogue. Hit me up in the comments. What do you think about it? Is this a legitimate way to go about doing metaphysics? And don't forget to like and subscribe. Please share with your friends so they can join the conversation. And that's all I got for today. Adios.